Welcome to Speaking Cinema, serious movie Jibber Jabber, a movie podcast coming to you from our quaint English cottage in Hollywood, California. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, Tumblr, Instagram, at Speaking Cinema, full blitzkrieg of social media.
We are everywhere.
Rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. We're only there. That's where we keep the podcast, on those services. Howdy ho, I'm your friendly next door neighbor, talking to you behind a fence. You can only see me from the bridge of my nose up. My name, Mr. Jibber Jabber. Joining me today on the podcast, we have a special call-in from the closet in your house, not that one, the other one. Everyone's favorite masked home invader, Kevin.
That's me.
Because I have a mask on. And I'm in the closet. Double buff.
This week on the Jibber Jabber, Every Man Has a Breaking Point, 1971 Straw Dogs. And continuing our serious, spooky Jibber Jabber Halloween horror celebration. Starring Dustin Hoffman. Starring Susan George. With Peter Vaughn and T.P. McKenna. Directed by Sam Peckinpah. Screenplay, Peckinpah and David Zelag Goodman. Based on the novel The Siege of the Treacher's Farm by Gordon Williams. Produced by ABC Films, really, and distributed in the U.S. by Cineram Releasing Company, based on the book. We said the name. That book came out in 1969. In case you are not familiar, upon moving to Britain to get away from the increasingly violent America, David and his wife Amy are bullied by a local group of construction workers. When they invade his home, mild-mannered David takes matters into his own hands. Straw Dogs was highly controversial upon its release, coming out in 1971, along with The French Connection, A Clockwork Orange, and Dirty Harry. It was a part of a national conversation about the increase in violence in cinema. Spoiler alert! So if you don't want to be spoiled, 30 seconds forward, guys. Spoiler alert! Along with the violence in the brutal rape scene, the uncut version was banned for the home video release in the UK until 2002.
UK did that for a lot of stuff. They did that for Clockwork Orange as well.
Yeah, the Cine family, I want to say like 3 or 4 Halloweens ago, did when they were doing their like 31 Days of Halloween stuff, they did all the video nasties.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
all horror movies that were banned in the UK. So it was like, you know, Texas Chainsaw, but then there was like The Burning and all kinds of shit. It was good.
Stuff you passed back and forth in primary school to your mates.
So yeah, there's a rumor like, the Blockbuster. Do you have multiple Blockbusters in your town or video stores?
Oh yeah.
So it'd be like, yeah, the one on this street, you know, they have it.
Yep.
They got The Evil Dead, you know, and it's like, what is this?
And they don't check ID at the Hollywood video on, Sprague.
And then you go there and the account's set up in your mom's name and you're not on it. So it's like, why did this guy get the training? No stranger to violence or controversy, this was director Sam Peckinpah's 4th film in a long and controversial career. A notorious womanizer, a notorious alcoholic, Peckinpah almost had to drop out of the film due to contracting pneumonia after an all-night drinking session. He recuperated but had to promise the producers that he would remain sober during the shoot. I don't drink. Can you get pneumonia from drinking, or is it pneumonia from, like, being outdoors all night drinking?
If you were passed out drunk, like violently drunk, and if he was in England, it gets very cold at night, and yeah, if you like passed out, you could get sick or pneumonia or something. And alcohol weakens your immune system, so you're more prone to getting sickness while intoxicated.
The more we know.
Yep.
The stars of this film both had issues with the subject matter. Dustin Hoffman said he doesn't like violent movies and only did Straw Dogs for the money. Susan George almost resigned when Peckinpah told her that her character would be sodomized. She only agreed to do it if Peckinpah filmed the scene in a non-explicit way.
Film the sodomy scene not explicitly, please.
I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but
you'll see that they pull it off.
Okay. Spoilers again.
Exactly.
The film was remade in 2011 with James Marsden and Kate Bothward. No one cares.
Yep.
As of this recording, the film is only available on DVD and Blu-ray. No streaming or digital purchase available. I don't know why, but it is what it is. It might be one of those rights things. It might be one of those, like, it has not sold well digitally, so we're not gonna, or not sold well, whatever. But I mean, if it had a remake, you'd think that someone would lock up those rights and
Well, I think the remake is definitely available digitally.
Yeah, but usually when you get because I used to hate remakes, the idea of remakes, like back in the early 2000s when we were getting like Dawn of the Dead remakes and such.
Yeah.
But then the interesting thing about remakes is that they always do a restoration and a new setup for the old one, right? So in a way, if you love the old one and you want like a new commentary track, a remake is, usually, a surefire way.
Usually you get that Blu-ray come out if it's not on Blu-ray.
Right, like when Friday the 13th remake came out, which everyone has promptly forgot about. It's like you got a new Blu-ray copy, you know what I mean? Like the Vinegar Syndrome where someone puts it out, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's real weird.
It can work.
Yeah.
Some movies need to be remade, I think.
Really?
They remake the wrong ones.
Name a movie that should be remade.
I will name a movie that I think the remake is infinitely better than the original.
Is it The Thing?
It's not The Thing. Come on.
What?
Come on. It's The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Oh. I never saw the remake, but I like the original. You don't like famously.
I think the original is bunk as hell. That remake, spot on. Good job, Toy Scott.
The only remake I've actively ever been happy for was the Conan remake. Because I do think that they should make a Conan movie every 10 years. And however we get to there.
I'm down with that.
But then you watch that Conan movie and it was really bobo for bonkers. So it's like, you know what I mean? But, yeah, we're getting off topic here. But Kev, you picked this movie. So this will be a redundant question, but have you heard of it and have you seen it?
Have heard of it, have seen it. Was familiar with it in my first year in film school. Wrote an essay about violence in 1971, cited all the movies that we cited earlier in the podcast. And I think this was a good choice for the horror because it's a more visceral, down-to-earth, real horror movie. I think it's not demons or ghouls or slashers or anything like that. It's like real people doing real nasty things to each other.
So I have heard of this movie. It's, my love of Bravo's top scaries 100 movies, it was in there somewhere, or top horror movies. I would consider it to be a horror movie, to your point. And to elaborate on this, I find myself, not in just horror movies, but with everything, I kind of like the more fantastic, sci-fi, paranormal, fantasy kind of shit. Like, if I'm watching a disaster movie, I'd much rather see Godzilla than an actual earthquake.
Yeah.
I'd rather watch Godzilla than San Andreas. That being said, it's like, I'm not against the home invasion movie. I think, and we'll get to that in a little bit more detail. It is different than a vampire, because spoilers for life, but there's no such thing as ghosts or vampires or werewolves or Bigfoot or Cthulhu or Leviathans or dragons or whatever.
Bigfoot's out there somewhere.
Listen.
Hide and seek champion.
Listen, if he's ever discovered, tag you're it. But so I do think it's interesting. You could divide horror in a lot of ways, like fear of the other, fear of the self, fear of disease, whatever. But this is an interesting one because this is like fear of things that can happen to you that don't happen all the time, but when they do happen are very terrible, right? A home invasion. Does that happen like all the time? Like, no. But it does happen,
And from a movie standpoint, the fantastical horror movies are easier to watch just as like, I'm going to watch a movie, I want to watch a horror movie. Watching something like Straw Dogs, where it's very visceral and very real, it kind of takes a chunk out of you, and it's not something you want to watch all the time.
Yeah. You got to be
in the real right mindset for that. So
right, and I think there's. I mean, I am primed to watch this movie based on years of people talking about it, putting it over. But like, if I'm looking through the horror section, you know what I mean? I see Straw Dogs, and I see. Next to it is like, fucking It Follows. I'd rather watch It Follows than Straw Dogs. They're just who I am, So, interested in this movie, but, heard about it over 10 years ago and still have not watched it. Contextual review. Sam Peckinpah, known as Bloody Sam, creator of a number of notable movies, married and divorced 3 times, a raging alcoholic, drug user, possibly manic depressive, but we're going to have to go ahead and say probably was a manic depressive, if for no other reason the drugs and alcohol and the constant divorces. Mm-hmm. He kept a very close group of friends who worked with him and cared for him until he died. He once got in a fight with a producer over being fired from a movie, and Peckinpah was quoted to say, "I shipped him as naked as one of his badly told lies." Are you familiar with the life and the work of Sam Peckinpah?
Indeed. He's one of my favorite directors.
And what are some notable... Can you toss out some notables?
His most notable is The Wild Bunch.
Oh, right.
A fantastic Western with Warren Oates and Ernest Borgnine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a great film. Should we do that for the podcast?
Yeah. I'll add that to my list of shame.
Yeah, that should be on your list of shame. The Wild Bunch is great. He did The Getaway with Steve McQueen. Yeah, he's just really a very strong... His movies are very manly. So gritty. So, like, men doing men stuff. But they have this real...
And if there's anything we need more on this movie is man movies.
But they have this real interesting melancholic streak in them, where there's always some pathos in with the violence and the action and all that.
Yeah, because I've heard of him and I've heard of some of these movies, and that's the always thing is that it seem to be they have a very male, like macho kind of vibe to his work, but then there's always that little maniacal edge of insecurity tossed in there, and I feel like that's very interesting, right? And I feel like a lot of people get that, like Tarantino has that kind of thing. He makes very male movies that are very him, but there's always a little bit of something in there that's like father-son stories, or like in Reservoir Dogs, it's like there's a little thing in there, like everyone's acting so cool, but but then you see these little cracks in the chinks in the armor. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Those definitely make for much more compelling films than just straight ahead, boring action stuff.
Yeah. So I'm very excited to finally see a Peckinpah movie. To my knowledge, I've never seen a Peckinpah movie, so I'm looking forward to sampling him. And this one being perhaps one of his most seminal movies.
Definitely the one that got him national attention because it was so in that whole controversy of cinemas getting very violent.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I've been doing that for years.
Speaking of violence in the cinema, Peckinpah himself was an interesting quote on violence in his films. Regarding the people that criticized him, he said, "Well, killing a man isn't as clean and quick and simple. It's bloody and awful. And maybe if enough people came to realize that shooting someone isn't just fun and games, maybe we'd get somewhere." We noted earlier that in the early 70s, there's a spike in violent and visceral films. And what do you think? A, why do you think that trend came in the 70s? And B, what are your thoughts on violence in general in film?
I think it was Vietnam being put in everybody's living room in the 60s.
And I do think, looking back at it, because a lot of these quotes are from that time or right after that time. Looking back on it, it's like you had this world where you had World War II, but that was like a glorious war. So even if someone got fucked up from that war, it's like, it's worth it. And then you have a time of peace, and then you go back into war. And we have a time of peace mixed with like the 50s, which was we all as a culture decided like we'll amend to these values that we never had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a reaction to World War II, and like we had enough excitement for one lifetime. You know, we're all gonna live in the suburbs and be boring, and we're gonna stay home, and that's what we're gonna do.
Right, yeah. But there's a cultural idea that was returning to normal, but that was never normal. There was never suburbs before then, right? Because everyone lived in the city or in a farm. There was no middle part. That's an invention of that era, the suburb. And B, like the idea that the man earns all the money and the woman works is like not for the majority of Americans, right? Like if you're lower class to mid class, right? Like you need two incomes. So this idea of returning to that is a false idea. The truth of that is that there was enough money in the economy where you could live off of one income.
Yep.
So it's like the 50s is a weird time where it's like in my opinion, a return to a fake reality where you're making the reality that we're striving for doesn't reflect anything from the past like you're saying it does. And so coming out of that into the 60s, then you get Vietnam into the 70s, and it's like movies don't have nudity, it's not really reflecting the world that you live in. So I think there's a backlash of like, no, we don't live in Leave It to Beaver, we live in a violent world. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think the violence just wasn't talked about. Like, people in the 50s, they did drugs. People got murdered. They said fuck. They had sex.
There was gay people.
There was gay people.
People knew about gay people. It wasn't a secret. It's just no one, if you knew about it, out of respect, you used to wouldn't talk about it.
Unless you were my grandma and you were shocked when Liberace was gay.
Well, people in the 80s, people were shocked when
George Michael.
George Michael was gay, and it's like we thought he was just British. It's like, what are you talking about?
And Rob Halford from Judas Priest.
Well,
he just liked leather.
Well, that caught us all off guard. So, I think I agree with you. I think that the times change, right? Like right now, we're in a time where horror movies are ghost stories, where action movies are superhero stories, right? It's all about emboldening yourself to do the right thing. That's of this time. In 20 years, in 10 years, in 5 years, maybe that will change and it'll turn into something else. You know what I mean? But
it will turn to something else,
right,
wherever the culture goes.
Right. So I think the culture went here, and I think it's coming out of the 50s and into the Vietnam era. I think people were more interested in seeing the worldview that they had on the screen. Mm-hmm. We picked this movie for Spooky Jibber Jabber because it tackles an interesting horror subgenre, the home invasion. These movies tend to be grounded in more reality. We talked about this a little bit earlier. And the scares are in our safest of places, the home. What do you think about home invasion films? Do you think it's specifically, because we could be here, you know me, we could be here all day talking about horror movies. Do you think this genre is scarier than others because it hits so close to home? What do you think? And what do you think makes it effective?
I think they tend to go into the extremes where other ones go back. Like slashers, there's always that level like this is kind of, we're a little tongue in cheek here. Somebody's dying, but they're dying in kind of I don't want to say a fun way, but an entertaining way,
Well, I think...
it's kind of as a cheap... not cheap thrill, but just like a really basic thriller, get your blood going. Home invasion is like, this could happen to you.
Right. Well, I think there's two divisions in here, where there's some slashers that are very themey, right? Like Chopping Mall or The Initiation, or anything that takes place like in a place where, like sleepaway camp, where all the deaths are like camp related. Someone gets poked with a fucking... with a stick that you used to make marshmallow. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all on a theme.
Gotcha.
So there's those slasher movies, but then some slasher movies do take place in the home, like Black Christmas or, like Halloween. It's kind of
Halloween was kind of sort of well, not really the first one, but
what,
the
slasher?
The first one to kind of go into the suburbs and be like, the suburbs, like, this could happen to you.
That and Black Christmas were the first two that, were really like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then I guess like maybe the Prowler. But they all kind of rub up against this home invasion subgenre. And I think it is scary, just like the way body horror is scary, because it's your body, you can't escape your body. It's your home. Like, you could leave your home, but that comes at a great cost. And a home is a place where you're, traditionally thought to be relaxing, thought to be safe, thought to be secure, right? It's yours.
You've spent a lot of time building it. You're not just going to abandon it all of a sudden,
And I do feel like, especially with the friends that we know, there's the people who don't like the Cabin in the Woods style movie do like the home invasion movie, or at least respect it. Because I think it's like, don't go somewhere scary, right? Intrinsically.
Yeah.
But if the scariness comes to you, that represents a real fear to them.
It's an interesting point.
And I think, it's kind of too bad we didn't have a lady on this episode, one of our many lady guests, because it'd be interesting to see what their take on this is, because, for a dude, like, Emily is always yelling at me to, like, not yelling. Emily's always telling me, like, hey, can you go check to see if the door is locked? Like, did you lock the door? And I'm like, he's like, I don't know, like, I don't remember. But if I'm like, hey, did you lock the door? She's like, knows that she did or didn't. So it's like, I do think that culturally there is a difference between men and women when it comes to this particular fear. You know what I'm saying?
No, I totally get what you're saying.
And I don't think it's exactly the same, but I do think the ghost genre sometimes the haunted house genre can kind of piggyback off of this, like the Paranormal Activity, where it's like the ghost is haunting her house, but it's really haunting her.
Yeah.
And it's coming to your house, so it doesn't matter where you live. This one, Insidious, all those. It's like, I think it kind of rubs up again against this this home invasion, the fear behind home invasion, right?
For sure, agreed. Concordantly.
Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite home invasion movie?
I think it's Straw Dogs and probably Halloween.
Interesting.
It's like both extremely well made, both extremely terrifying.
Rob Zombie's Halloween or John Carpenter's Halloween?
Come on, John Carpenter's
you don't
Halloween.
like you don't like the Rob Zombie one?
I thought it was okay, but I feel like he kind of just made Halloween again. You know,
I feel like
It's
he
didn't put it. I don't feel like he put his own twist on it.
Well, the beginning part was his own twist, and then it became Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd say my favorite one is You're Next.
It's a great one.
It's pretty sweet. And then The Strangers I've heard is good, but I want to check that one out, but I've never seen
Yeah, I
it.
have a friend who's a big horror aficionado, really loved The Strangers.
Yeah, when that came out, I got caught up in the negativity around it, which
Yeah.
I think is unfortunate because...
I think sometimes they get blackballed because they're controversial at the time. Or like there maybe some news story came out about a home invasion. They're like, well, releasing this movie is in poor taste, and it's like the movie's probably going to last longer than that news story, you know? So, and if you don't want to see it, don't give it your money. It's that simple.
So, Kev, you got anything else you want to add about Straw Dogs, or should we get into it?
I think we can get into a little What This Movie.
A little What This
and
Movie.
Then get into some Straw Dogs.
Get out, get into some Straw Dogs, come back. What This Movie, if you're not familiar, we'll name a movie, we'll say if we saw it, we liked it, we loved it, if we didn't see it, maybe some other things. Play along at home if you want. This time, the theme is Sam Peckinpah and home invasion movies. Starting it off, The Wild Bunch. I haven't seen it.
Fantastic film.
Panic Room.
That's a good underrated little gem.
You know,
I think.
that is definitely the word. It's definitely underrated. That movie is great, capital great.
You know who?
David Fincher.
You know who David Fincher wanted for Dwight Yoakam's role?
Who?
He wanted Maynard James Keenan.
They couldn't get him though, huh?
Couldn't get him. He was too busy with Tool.
Too busy making wine.
Yep.
You're next.
Great film. Like
Fantastic. Couldn't recommend it more. Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia. Bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia.
I have not seen it, but I really want to. It's a Sam Peckinpah film.
Love that name.
Great name.
Cross of the Iron.
Saw it. Wasn't impressed with it. Unfortunately.
Sam Peckinpah?
Sam Peckinpah.
Dude.
World War II, stars James Coburn. Interesting story. I didn't think it was very well shot.
Never saw it. Funny Games.
It's a good film.
Is that Peckinpah?
It's Michael Haneke.
But Home Invasion.
Yeah, home invasion movie.
Never seen it, but definitely want to see it. Last House on the Left.
Haven't seen it.
As we discussed in the Scream episode, or upcoming on the Scream episode, I have seen it. I believe it was edited for television, not for on demand, and I did not care for it. But I would like to revisit. When a Stranger Calls.
Never saw it.
Never saw it. That or the remake. The Strangers.
Haven't seen it.
Want to see it though.
Heard good things.
Heard great things. No Good Deed.
Haven't seen it. When I saw the trailer, I was like, come on, Idris. Come on, Idris Elba. What are you doing here? You were on the wire.
Oh yeah, no Good Deed. I have no interest in that. High Tension.
Good for 3/4, and then it just
You don't like that twist ending,
just shits on everything that came before it.
Ugh. they didn't.
I'm still mad about that. Still mad.
Oh man, The Purge.
Haven't seen it, but want to see it.
To be fair, I only saw like half of it when I was at the gym on HBO. But I will say, I did like what I saw.
And now, gotta see it after we went through Halloween Horror Nights together.
Yeah,
at
very
Universal.
recently. Mm-hmm.
They have the Purge theme as kind of the general all over the park theme.
Yeah, it's definitely omnipresent. There's like a scare zone that's the Purge. There's a
2 scare zones.
yeah,
Purge.
yeah.
Really good stuff.
Yeah,
so,
great.
It inspired me to go see the movie.
Mission accomplished. The Ref.
I remember seeing it years ago on like Comedy Central, and even when I was young, I realized it wasn't that funny. So no.
Lakeview Terrace.
Again, come on, Samuel. What are you doing? Samuel.
I would say it's a decent movie if you're really into the like can't be trusted neighbor home invasion subgenres, but if you're not and you don't, if you watch a trailer and you're like, I don't want to watch that, it's not gonna win you over.
That's a terrible title.
Lakeview Terrace, really?
I think that's awful.
I thought it was alright. The Ballad of Cable Hugh.
I haven't seen it, but that's another Peckinpah film.
I've not seen it either.
That was one of his that was pre-Wild Bunch.
Major Dundee.
Another pre-Wild Bunch Sam Peckinpah. I haven't seen it.
Haven't seen it either.
I'll check it out.
Firewall.
Harrison Ford. I remember that being an okay little thriller. Not great. but fun.
I don't think
I think I saw it on a plane.
as many people see many movies. The way movies were intended to be seen. Home Alone, the ultimate home invasion movie.
Man, that kid's an asshole, isn't he?
He's
a dick.
It's a weird. As a kid, that movie is such a child fantasy of like using your toys and your intuition and your creativity to get at adults. Like, that's so fun. As an adult, it's like this movie is fucking insanity. You know what I mean? Like,
kind of twisted.
Yeah, it's real twisted. It's like Passion of the Christ level torture. You know what I mean?
It really is. And oh yeah, being named Kevin around the time that movie comes out, that was fun.
No good. No good.
That was fun.
So that wraps it up for What This Movie. I hope you guys all enjoyed playing along at home. Any plugs or mugs, Kev?
Now I'm ready to let's do some straw dogs.
Let's get into it. Here we go.
Here we go.
And we're back.
We're back.
Straw Dogs, just watch it. Kev, how'd you watch Straw Dogs?
I got
Where and when?
Got the Blu-ray from Netflix, and I watched it this last Friday.
I also got the Blu-ray from Netflix. Added back the Netflix plan specifically for this podcast.
It's so good.
Watching movies, trying to save a little scratch because we're gonna, if you can rent a couple movies a month, adds up over time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, also got a Blu-ray from Netflix. Watched it here in my palatial Hollywood apartment.
Palatial.
All one room of it. American David Sumner, a mathematician, and his British wife, Amy, returned to her hometown, a small village in England. I don't believe they ever told us where.
Yeah, I don't think they ever say the name.
Amy is of interest to her ex-boyfriend, Charlie Veneer, and his cronies, Norman Skull, Chris, and Phil Riddleway, who are working on Amy and David's unfinished garage. Amy discovers their dead cat hanging on a light chain in their bedroom closet. She claims the workmen are responsible. She asks David to confront them. He attempts to, very anemically, and ends up agreeing to go hunting with them instead. During the hunting trip, the workmen take him to a remote forest meadow and leave him there with the promise of driving birds towards him. Having ditched David, Charlie Venner returns to the couple's farmhouse where he rapes Amy, and then his pal Norman also rapes Amy. The next day, David, who is unaware of his wife's ordeal, and she doesn't mention it, and he doesn't figure it out. David then goes on to fire the workmen. The Sumners attend a church social where Amy becomes distraught after seeing the men who raped her. They leave the social, and while driving home through the thick fog, accidentally hit mentally ill man named Harry Niles, who is a local villager and has sexual desires for children, and had just murdered a young girl on accident earlier in the night. A lot happened during that church function.
Wholesome little town, this town.
Soon the drunken locals, including Amy's rapists, are pounding on the door of the Sumner's home. They want to deliver sweet mob justice. The local magistrate, Major Scott, arrives to deal with the situation, but is accidentally, and maybe not so accidentally, shot dead. David realizes that he, Amy, and Niles are now in mortal danger and prepares to defend his household. In the ensuing mayhem, all the attackers are either killed or incapacitated. That's the end of the story.
Yeah, David drives off with Harry. Yeah, they drive off in the night, and then that's the end of the story. Fun, wholesome, for the whole family movie.
Henry Niles.
Yep.
So this is the part where we speak on our thoughts about the movie. Kev, you picked this movie for us. So I naturally want to assume that you are a fan of this movie.
In a way.
I'm
a fan of this movie. I've seen it probably 4 or 5 times now. It's never easy to watch. It's a very heavy story, obviously. A lot of people die, girl gets raped. It's a very just ragged, edgy, dirty in a way kind of story, and it's never pleasant to watch it, but I think it's a very important film. And I think it's a different kind of horror movie, and that's why I wanted to talk about it for Halloween.
Mm-hmm. And this is the first for our podcast, if you're listening to these in order, don't like this movie.
Amazing.
And I don't really appreciate it. And I'm going to really be blunt here. 25 minutes in, I was like, if I wasn't watching this movie for our friendly little podcast, I would turn it off. Because I was bored stiff with the first half of the movie.
It's a slog the first 20, 30 minutes, that's for sure.
And then there's a rape scene that has more Q's than A's. Questions and answers. And then there's the home invasion, which is a very well-made sequence, like a 20-minute sequence. But in comparison, the rest of the movie looks cheaply made compared to like the time and effort they made into the home invasion. And I mean, in the end, David is defending a rapist guy for justice, right? They want due process of the law. They don't want mob justice, which is something that I can get behind, and I think in today's age is very relevant. But I think the movie fails to sell you on that. And I think the character of David, the movie presents him as sympathetic, but he's not the most sympathetic character. The wife is, because she's raped for no good reason, because there's no good reason to rape a woman. And the movie really complicates that whole scenario in a way that feels to me inept.
It's very complicated, because she has the scene where she purposely walks by topless in front of the...
Which I appreciate as someone... Okay, so there's a story...
Go on.
So, long story short, me and my girlfriend were hanging out at the pool upstairs on our roof, and there's a very European set of girls. I call them the Russian mafia, because they're all like Russian, and they speak in Russian. They just sunbathe all day. So one girl was sunbathing. You take your top off and you sunbathe your back or whatever, right? Get that sweet tan, no tan line. And then she kind of like stood up and like turned around and like flashed her boobs to like the whole pool area. Unto which I tried to tell my girl, like, look. And she's like, what? I'm like, you missed it. But, so she did that, and that's it. Like, okay, cool, you did it. You know what I mean? Like.
But then it gets complicated, too.
But that's not an invitation for me to do anything.
No, it's not.
You know, and I think that the movie...
But she gets in a fight with David before then, and then does that, and it's very murky if she did that on purpose. Did she do that to try and hurt David? Did she do that... For fun.
Right.
And then it gets...
But, okay, go ahead.
Then it gets really complicated when she's being raped by Charlie, her old boyfriend. But then there's these moments where it kind of looks like she submits and...
Well, she starts caressing his hair and kissing him back.
Exactly.
Whereas for the first part of the rape, she is very adamantly saying no. Every time he does something, she
looks horrified.
And she's horrified. He's like ripping her clothes. He threatens to slap her. He slaps her a couple times and then threatens to slap her, and she takes that very, very hard. And so then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she starts caressing him, which I interpreted as her trying to play along to, like, satiate him and make him stop.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure the movie is doing that, though. That's just my interpretation. That's how I make sense of that scene, which is a scene that doesn't really make any... It's a moment that doesn't make sense because they don't sell you on why she does that.
Yeah.
Why she caresses his hair all of a sudden. And then she gets raped again by a second guy.
And that one is, without a doubt, that one is the worst.
But then the movie also makes her rapist sympathetic because the guy he's done raping her. He looks up, his friend's holding a shotgun at him, and his friend's like nodding like he wants to take a turn, and he's like, no. And it's like, I get why he would want to say no for a number of reasons, but it's like, that guy's not the sympathetic character. She's the sympathetic character. I think the movie doesn't understand that.
Yeah.
And I think that's out of ineptitude.
Or ineptitude. Interesting.
Like, I think they don't understand, like, no, these guys are the villains here. And I think in that moment, they're like, the guy who's raping is like, oh man, now I have to, like, help her get raped. Like, because this guy's holding a shotgun at me. It's like, I don't feel bad for you, motherfucker. You're a rapist.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't know. I think it does try to make her... It gives us doubt about her. But she's always kind of... You can tell, she used to date this guy Charlie, who's this big burly dude. Man's man.
So they come back to town, and she's like, I'm married now, and he's very dismissive of this, right?
Yeah.
He acts like that doesn't mean anything. And she is not into him when he's hitting on her in the beginning of the movie. And she's not into him ever, you know what I mean? And then he rapes her.
Yep.
So it's like, I don't know. I feel like that's very cut and dry in that way.
Well, and again, then you have Dustin Hoffman, he's the opposite of all of these English guys, who are these big burly dudes, and he's this very meek American who... Intellectual, doesn't want any kind of confrontation. Yeah, when she tells him, go fire those guys, or, like, confront them, he's kind of like, oh, hey guys, so he's that kind of guy,
Yeah.
And then... Really, the rape is kind of a catalyst to explore the violence that's all inherent in us, in turn, what Sam Peckinpah, I think, is trying to say. Because David kills these guys without ever knowing they raped her, basically.
Well, yeah, and then later...
He never learns about this.
Right, he never learns about that rape, but then later when they're breaking the house, one of them tries to do it again.
Yeah, one tries to do it again.
And he runs up to help save her from that scenario. Mm-hmm. So that's something that does happen. So he knows about that, but he doesn't know that she's actually ever been raped.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what the movie's really doing is showing just how animalistic we all are, and that somebody like David, without a whole lot of provocation, can become that violent. Even though, like I said, the wife being raped, that would be reason enough for him to like want to kill all these guys, but he never learns that, and he still is like this super violent being deep down inside.
Well, let's back up really quick. I think that it's also clear that she did not enjoy the rape because the scene afterwards, she's in bed, totally fucked up. You know, you can tell she's been crying. David comes home, he's oblivious. He kisses her, and then we flash to the rape, right? So now she's reliving this, which is like a real thing that happens to like rape victims.
Yeah.
And then
it does it throughout the movie.
The rest of the whole movie, when she goes to the church function, she sees these guys and she flashes back, and then the preacher is doing like his stupid little magic tricks, and she keeps flashing back to these images of the rape, which is a very well constructed sequence that really sells you on her being affected by this in a very negative way. So I feel like any idea that she is been raped and that she was not raped, that it was consensual anyway, is debunked by the fact that afterwards they keep showing her not liking having had like this. And it's not like she regrets it, right? The way that it's shown is very gross.
Yeah, it's torturous.
Right. Yeah, it's not like she's like, oh man, I made a bad decision. It's like, no, these guys, you know, they show the gun, they show the dude smacking her, it's really selling you on the idea that like they truly forced themselves on her against her will, and so it just makes the other part where she's caressing him feel more inept again. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So you brought up does David? And the question really is, does David enjoy killing those guys? And I'm going to say no, because he only gets violent with them. He fires them for being shitty employees, and they aren't shitty employees. And they try to spin it like, "What are you talking about, sir? We were working hard this whole time." It's like they're drinking beers and. Yeah. You know, they're like not even wearing
taking a long time in that garage.
And they're wearing like, you know, mod clothes. They're not even like dressed for construction work.
Exactly, yeah. Very 70s mod fashion.
So he fires them and they deserve it, and you know, he's never able to confront them about the cat being murdered. And then he fires them, but he kind of pays them for the work that they did, and he says just go away. And then he only gets violent when he's directly threatened. You know what I mean? Like they shoot the magistrate. They come looking for this guy, and he's like, "You can't take him. You're an angry, drunken mob. You can't just take this guy." And I don't know what he did or didn't do. You guys say he may have raped this girl. We as the audience know that he killed her on accident. But he's like, "You can't take him. The cops can take him." And then they shoot the cop on accident or on purpose. It's kind of vague, in my opinion. And then he's like, "They just killed that guy. They got to cover up all of their tracks here." And then they're throwing rocks at the house and stuff. So I don't know if he really builds up to that. I think it's thrust upon him suddenly in this scene. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But your interpretation of that is that it builds up and then he finally snaps.
Yeah, I think it really is a snap moment, because I think there's a symbol of his glasses being shattered, which is on the poster, which he gets. I think there's a real turning point where he goes to a very feral mode, which is against what we've seen of him this entire movie.
I mean, he definitely, I agree with that. He definitely goes completely feral on them, and that scene is great. And I feel like if that was the whole movie, this movie would be great. You know what I mean? Like, but you know, with a little bit of an intro. But I don't think.
You don't think he enjoyed it?
I don't think he enjoyed it. I think he just kind of realized in that moment, like, hey, I got to do what I got to do to live, because these guys are not going to let anyone walk out of here.
I think there's a moment when he bashes this guy's head in, and he has a slight smile when he does it.
Yeah,
and I think that to me is a very telling moment.
Yeah, I guess I interpret that as he has just given himself over to this process of violence, of defending himself. So I think we're seeing similar things, but the interpretation is a little bit different.
I mean, Peckinpah definitely works. That's kind of his zone, is like he never wants to tell you exactly what to think or what to do. He just presents you with very complicated scenarios.
And I think I do see that here. I just feel like the movie doesn't know what it really feels about it, and then in certain ways doesn't execute based on what it does think about it. Let me get.
And it has a very ugly worldview.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I mean, again, that's a Peck and Paw staple.
Mm-hmm.
It's this worldview of like everybody's trash, or
Right.
everybody is just one step away from being
a complete savage.
Exactly.
Right. So to tie into that, we're talking about the violence in the movie. According to Wikipedia, it's a quote from Wikipedia. I don't know where it's really sourced from, but it was sourced, so we know it comes from somewhere.
Somewhere.
A broken link, perhaps. Sam Peckinpah said Sam Peckinpah, quote, saw violence as a product of human society and not of nature. It is a result of man's competition with each other over power and dominance, and their inability to negotiate the competition without resorting to brutality. Peckinpah also used violence as a means to achieve catharsis, believing that his audiences would be purged of violence by witnessing it explicitly on screen. One of the major inspirations for his violent sequences in The Wild Bunch was that. Peckinpah later admitted that this idea was mistaken, and the audiences had come to enjoy the violence in his films rather than be horrified by it, something that deeply troubled him later in his career. Do you agree with that assessment of A. Peckinpah in context of this movie, and just do you think that is right?
It's interesting that he thinks people enjoyed it, because I don't think he films violence in a fun way.
Right. And I think there's a difference between enjoying violence on screen as a product that is created in a rectangle that you look through, as opposed to wanting to do it yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I love super violent movies, right? But real life violence, even mild real life violence, right, it's horrific to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, seeing some guy like fall down stairs on a skateboard is a violent motion that I'm like, oh no, like, oh god,
Yep.
But seeing, a guy get shot in the foot on accident, like happens in this movie, to me that's funny because it's a movie. It's not real. I'm looking at a moving picture box.
Yeah.
It's a weird. That's a quote that is very contradictory, because the result of man's competition with each other over power and dominance and their inability to negotiate this competition without resorting to brutality is nature.
That is nature.
That's not society. Society is all about working together. Society is all about rules and following those rules, right? And now, if this movie was about like something like institutional racism or the class system, I would totally get it. But this movie is about basically when people are not governed by society, when they are free to be their own id and not be the super ego part. That is what is going on in this movie. You know what I mean?
Completely agree. Yeah, and it's people have this weird, some kind of new age people have a weird concept of nature as like the flawless thing. Mm-hmm. It's bears eat their cubs so that they can fornicate again with their mates. Like they're animals that their sole purpose is to be food for other animals, like antelope and deer.
Right, and bunnies and things.
And bunnies. Right. It's nature is a violent, nasty thing.
Right.
And yeah, it's this view that it's untouched and completely beautiful. It is beautiful in a way.
Yeah, and it is balanced in a way, but that balance
is bathed in blood.
Yeah.
It's completely, those scales are just covered in blood.
Right. In society, it's the things that we create to alleviate that. So our natural competition can be fed into things that are healthy. With sports in context of a healthy environment, right, is a beautiful thing. You can work together as a team against other people, but there are no real stakes. Stakes are wins and losses, but in the end, it doesn't really matter, right? It's just about doing the action, as opposed to like just having a rumble, and everyone just, two gangs fighting. That's not healthy. That's not a way to live. That's not a world that I'm interested in.
Yeah, or gladiator fights back in Roman times.
Right. Yeah. And I think that in this movie, going back to this movie and that, I think this movie is about nature reimposing its dominance over society. And it's like the small town is lost to its id. The movie opens, they're in this bar. The bearded dude, whatever his fucking name is, he's drinking and they want to cut him off. And he smashes up the bar, punches the dude in the face, fights off dudes, steals a beer. The constable is in the bar, sees all this, and he's like, hey, that's enough. And it's like, hey, bro, this dude is out of control. And then he's like, I'll pay for it. And the bartender's so afraid of him that he won't take his money.
Yep.
And it's just like, I think this town is lawless, and that's really what the problem is here. That there's not enough society here. They're isolated. They're in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around, and their nature is creeping back. And all the cobblestone streets and all the fucking concrete means nothing because they're reverting back to their. Like, they fancy this woman, so they'll take her no matter what. You know what I mean? It's gross.
Kids are hitting on people in this movie.
And also, the movie opens with kids dancing in a cemetery. It's like, get the fuck out of there, you kids.
The Wild Bunch opens similarly, where kids are watching two scorpions fight. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Peckinpah has this recurring theme of like, children are kind of part of this thing too. So it's I don't know. It's interesting. He's opened those two movies in a very similar fashion.
Also, and that's very interesting, and I do want to see the Wild Bunch
which I do think is a better film overall than Straw Dogs. I think Straw Dogs is just dealing with a much more abstract concept in a much heavier way, whereas the Wild Bunch is kind of about the end of the Wild West.
Right. So, in the Wild West, I think is a more fitting setting for wild behavior.
Yes,
intrinsically. Also, the rapist guy is walking around town. In the scene in the bar, they say, "Hey, you take care of your brother. He was talking to children, and if he does what he did again, there's gonna be trouble." So basically, this guy molested, raped, inappropriately touched a child, and because everyone's so bros here, he didn't go to jail. There was no trial. He's just walking around town, and they're like, "Just don't do it again, or else." And it's just like, where the fuck is the law here? You know what I mean? Like, it's children.
Yep.
What? That's crazy to me.
And yeah, it's interesting that I think it's a very conscious choice to put this in England and say, because America was very violent at the time. Mm-hmm. And like David says, there's a line where they tell him, like, if he ever sees violence, he says only between commercials.
Yeah, have you ever seen anyone get knifed? And he's like, only between commercial breaks.
Yep. So it's, we're coming off of Vietnam. Actually, Vietnam's still going on, 1971. Mm-hmm. We're seeing it on our TV. We're seeing violence going on, and I think Peckinpah wants to show it's not just an American thing. Like, in the world, there's this feral violence just outside of our door.
I just think that the movie doesn't have enough judgment against these people who are doing terrible things.
It kind of doesn't take a position.
It doesn't. And I think the only position it takes is that we're sympathetic towards David, who arguably is the person who suffers least in this movie, in a lot of ways.
True.
Up until the end, when him and his family are attacked. Let's just rewind really quick. Did you think that David and Amy are a happy couple?
There's definitely cracks in their foundation. And I think it shows that a lot. She's kind of wants to be a little more free, a little more go-getter spirit, and he's very rigid. And I think they almost do that to a fault. I think he's a little too stereotypical intellectual. It's kind of doesn't let him breathe.
Right, and I think their move to the country was a huge mistake. They're both young. There's literally nothing to do in this town, much less where they live, right? It's a house, and then there's just a bunch of, like, marshes around or whatever. She's bored, clearly. He doesn't know how to be there for her, nor does he really that interested in doing any of his own work. She'd be better off in a city where she could have a job and friends and places to go. Yeah. And she is, and, he's restless too, but, he has his work to, like, at least be something to do for 8 hours a day. And then, she's a girl who's not wearing a bra, who wants to just be, like, free, like you alluded to. And it's like, this is not the place for that. And I don't understand how this movie could justify them wanting to move back here. Why would she? It's like she wanted to move. There's again an argument point, and she's like, "Why are we here?" And he said, "Because you said that you could be happy here." And it's like, how could she ever even think that? Mm-hmm. This place is shit.
Yep. No question.
It's a muddy town in cold-ass England.
Mm-hmm. With, like, one pub that everybody goes to.
She'd be happier living in, like, Miami, where she could, like, be on a topless beach and, like, not get harassed. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, that is a weird... When I was writing up my thoughts for this thing, I was just like, what the fuck were they doing in this town?
And he really looks down on her intellectually. There's the scene where they're playing chess in bed. And he's like, I bet I can get undressed and do my, like, workout and all that before you even make your next move. And it's this weird dynamic they have of he's always looking down on her.
Yes.
Basically.
What do you think that this movie's saying about monogamy and love?
That it probably doesn't exist. through the narrow worldview of this movie, that's what I think they're saying.
Well, it's interesting because they argue...
Or that we're animals, basically. Like, that we can't do it.
Right, because she messes with his... He's a mathematician. She messes with his equation. She gets mad at him for ignoring her, and he snaps at her and is like, you should clean the kitchen and basically be a housewife. And she draws a line and puts her gum on the blackboard, and he's like, don't you do it, don't you do it. And then she does it and, like, runs away crying. And it's a weird... Yeah, they don't get along. But then part of me questions, is that just circumstance? Would I go crazy if I was in England like that? And I would. Because there's nothing to do. And there's also one tender scene that they have, one in the whole fucking movie, which is when they have sex after the chess game that you just mentioned. And it's actually a scene that I felt like was very true emotionally, where, so she's all into him, he's trying to take off his watch, he's trying to set the alarm, she gets frustrated, like, hey, like, you know, what about this is not interesting.
We got the moment here.
Yeah, we're at the moment here. But then what I liked is felt like a very real moment is that he's like, wait a minute, and then he starts being playful again and bends it back because he fucked it up, and then he's like, no, we're still here in this moment, and he bends it back to that moment, and I felt like that scene was very tender and cute and playful and nice. And then it's made weird because the kids are watching them through the window, and it's just like, what's going on here?
This town. Holy shit.
Yeah, and there's like a little girl and her boyfriend is like, do you fancy him? And it's just like, and then that's never revisited again. Very odd.
Yeah, it's a weird cast of characters in this town, no question. So do you think this is a horror movie?
I think it is, because ultimately it's an untraditional horror movie. Ultimately, you know, in the end it becomes a home invasion movie, and it's kind of a precursor to that genre, but it's a horror movie in that it's like, yeah, it's a horrific worldview. We live in a society we live in a world that is on the brink of just savage behavior. You know what I mean? And that's a horrific thought.
Yep.
You know, it is a horror movie. It's not scary. There's no fear. I mean, I think also we probably should have had like a girl on this episode, just because I think the interpretation a woman would have of this movie is radically different than what we would have.
Most likely.
I'm pretty grossed out by how this movie portrays that rape scene, but I think to a woman, it'd be very interesting to see that interpretation.
Yeah.
And I think it would go both ways. I think some people would see it one way, some women, and I think some women would see it another way. But,
yeah, when I was doing my college paper, where this was part of it, widely different opinions on that scene in particular. Like, whole essays written about, this 2-minute scene. So
I just want to
gnarly.
Yeah. I just want to talk about the title really quick. I don't even have a question here, but it's a Lao Tzu quote, Chinese philosopher. Heaven and earth are not humane and regard the people as straw dogs. So it's the idea that nothing matters, right? It's just nihilism.
Which is interesting because Peckinpah thinks nature is the ideal and society is the problem. But that quote is really saying, I think that we're all part of nature and we're all dead, basically. Right. Like, we're all expendable. Mm-hmm. So I find it interesting that he named that. I think he misinterprets that quote a little bit.
Yeah, I think Bloody Sam is not as smart as he thinks he is.
Bloody Sam drank a lot.
So, real quick, the ending. The rapist guy is being driven back to town by our boy David. He says, I don't know my way home. And David says, I don't know either, with a smile. And that's the ending of the movie. What do you make of that? To me, that is a non-ending.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a non-ending, too. It's one thing I take issue. This movie's not perfect, but that's one I'm like, you really had a chance to make a statement there, and I think you kind of whiffed on it.
Yeah,
so.
Really. I agree. Are you ready for nitpicks?
Ready.
Go. Many beat up white sneakers. What the fuck?
David's annoying bagpipe music as his party music.
Oh god. Although that really outed him for being an asshole. Where people are over and he just turns up this super loud music. It's shitty.
And it's bagpipes.
England is cold and miserable. My arthritic hip, my arthritic ankle, and my arthritic knees just at the sight of that dreary weather just started to hurt.
Janice's teeth. Oh boy.
Yeah, well,
that girl's got some chompers on her.
That's fair. It's your nitpick. The movie is slow.
I'd say the first 20 minutes it takes too long to get going.
And then when they're home invading, they throw a million rocks through a million windows. Apparently, that house is made out of windows.
It's like in Bullet when Steve McQueen loses 5 hubcaps. Yep. Yeah, the house is just windows.
5 seconds.
That's all I got.
I'm going to end with saying that the rape scene was not very well done, in my opinion. In that moment where she plays along, I think is just reveals the movie to be a confused work.
It really throws a wrench in what they're trying to say.
Right.
I think.
Cool stuff.
Cool stuff.
Go.
I like the one gag when David gives them a peace sign, which is a vulgar sign in England, and then they give it right back with the knowing them saying, like, this guy's an asshole.
The consensual sex scene was cute.
I do like the gore effects. They do look good.
Yes.
Like their burned faces, the blown off foot.
Right. The shotgun blast.
Yep.
Hoffman not doing the shtick that we have come to know that he does. You know, his like, you guys don't understand. How blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That thing.
He's not a kvetchy Jew. He's just like, he really is doing something really different.
Mm-hmm. Different take on horror. Kind of a different kind of a movie.
Yeah. I actually like the setting a lot. I think it really distinguishes itself between being an American setting and an English setting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Home invasion is shot very well. The rape flashbacks tell you on how fucked up and devastated she is. And oil to the face, bear trap to the face. That's what I like to see.
Bear trap to the face, pretty gnarly. Yeah. The editing, as in all of Peckinpah's film, is impeccable.
Yeah.
So, impeccable.
5 seconds.
That's all I got.
All right. So, yeah, a mixed bag, I would say. Do you have any sequel theories or anything?
Oh, boy. Yeah. David and the rapist go on all kinds of adventures across the English countryside.
No. Oh, also, I want to say part of the cool stuff is what's the wife's name? Amy. That actress is very pretty, and
Susan George.
I think she's pretty, and when the movie allows her to be charming, she's very charming.
You should check out Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry.
Ah, fuck! I gotta check that out
because she's Dirty Mary, and she's quite, like you said, charming in that movie.
That's great.
Yep.
So to wrap it up, I don't think this movie works, and I don't particularly like it. I just think that it's kind of a confused production in a lot of ways. It's because there's interesting stuff in there, but I think all in all, that cake needs a little bit more time in the oven.
Yeah, you think a few too many ambiguities thrown in there to really sell you on what they're saying.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, Roger Ebert of all people liked the remake better than the original.
I read that too. So
maybe next year we'll do the remake.
Apparently, it's in Mississippi.
Mississippi, I thought it was North New England.
Nah, it's
Mississippi.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Definitely. So
same. This movie didn't need to take place in England. It could be anywhere.
Yep.
Any isolated place.
Exactly. So yeah, I think this movie works on a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very complicated.
Yep.
I think it takes more time than we probably have here to really pick apart everything that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very dense movie. I don't particularly like it, but that's not necessarily negative. I don't find the movie enjoyable to watch.
Right.
But
it's a dour experience.
Sometimes you kind of feel like you're being lectured to a
Yeah.
little bit about violence and what we are, but not as overtly as some movies of that genre. Funny games.
Funny games.
Yeah, it's not. I would never just sit down and watch this thing. I got to really gear myself up to ever watch it again. I don't know if I ever will watch it again. I think 5's enough.
I mean, it's a very divisive movie, and I think that does. I mean, I've heard of this movie for such a long time, so I am glad that I saw it and now get to have an opinion on it.
And I'm totally divisive movies tend to be the ones that I gravitate towards because. You know, I love The Martian, but sometimes I like something that's got a little edge to it that's going to piss some people off, too, you know?
Yeah, and unfortunately, with divisive movies, sometimes you're the person that gets pissed off.
Sometimes you're the one that gets mad.
That's it for us. Kev, you want to promote anything here?
I got nothing.
I want to promote this very podcast you're listening to. Follow us at Speaking Cinema. Just type it into Google. You'll find something.
We'll be there. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr.
Yeah, those are where we're at. Everybody, see you later. Keep your doors locked.
And in the words of Cousin Abby from Snatch, yeah, don't go to England.
Yeah, stay out of just stay out of that whole area.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.
ready is the question.
I am ready.
The answer is no.
No? Couldn't find the record button, but I found it. To summarize, American David Sumner, a mathematician, and his wife Amy returned to her small town. Hold on. Hold on.
Good.
To summarize, American David Sumner, a mathematician, and his wife Amy returned to their hometown. To
her hometown.
American David realizes that he, Amy, and Niles are now in mortal danger and prevents it. And all right, so 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to Speaking. Wait, hold on. Is this on the right setting? The right.
It is the full circle. So.
Oh, we don't want that. We want
We want the two dots, right? That'll probably help. Check. 1, 2.
Check.
There we go.
All right, let's take this over. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Howdy ho! I'm your friendly. Continuing our spooky Jibber. Wait, no, that's not serious spooky Jibber Jabber.
Yeah, that's it.